Hello, Joel Mosier, the Director of Science, Technology, and Research for the United States Space Force here. I'm very sorry that I cannot be there with you today. I would like to have been a part of the conversation about the state of the Space Industrial Base and some of the things my office is doing. But I am heartened in the fact that many of my colleagues are there and will be a part of the panel discussion after this. But I did want to take the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that my office is doing, particularly related to the long-term vision and strategies for space in particular. You know, technology is growing faster than it ever has in human history, and it spreads faster throughout the globe than it ever has before. And this is natural. Technology builds upon other technologies. So just mathematically, you would expect an exponential growth. Just think about things like your smartphone, which was enabled by other technologies like digital cameras and cellular phone networks and microelectronics that created a new technology, the smartphone, that has just grown amazingly in many different ways since then. Well, lots of technologies are like that, but space has been a little bit slow to grow. And part of that historically has been the high cost of access to space. You know, in the past, it's cost tens of thousands of dollars to get a single kilogram of mass into low Earth orbit. But things like reusable launch and microelectronics have created a new era of high capability access to space to do things that we've never been able to do before. And you see this in all of the new business ventures, the new space industry, the capabilities that we have on orbit. Just about everything you look at today, whether it's number of launches, number of objects in space, the amount of venture capital being put into space, or the bandwidth or imagery available from space, all of those things are growing exponentially. The problem with exponential growth is it stresses our linear human brains to understand what the possibilities might be. We tend to project into the future in a more linear way. And so that gap between what we can anticipate and what we will see will be full of chaos, amazement, and disruption. It is my job, and the job of my office, to understand within that chaos, amazement, and disruption, what can we do? What strategies can we employ to push us towards positive things as opposed to negative things from a national security perspective? And that is what our project called the Space Futures Workshop Series is all about. It's really to try to get a handle on the long-term vision for the Space Force. And it really comes in three parts. We borrowed these parts from NATO and their long-term planning process. The first step of our three-step process is to understand the scenarios of the future. You know, look at a few things and try to put bounds on what's the maximum and minimum of those things going into the future and develop scenarios around those. So back in 2019, we published something called the Future of Space 2060 report. So we were looking 40 years out into the future. And we looked at three aspects. We looked at money in space, the revenue that's derived from space, and the wealth streams and the economy in space, and put bounds on that. We also looked at the number of humans living and working in space and what that would drive in terms of future scenarios. And finally, leadership in space. Who's going to lead all of that work? And that was documented in the Future of Space 2060. Many of you have probably seen that, read that. That was step one. Step two, which we've been undertaking ever since that time, has been about strategy development. What are the strategies that push us towards the positive futures and away from the negative futures? We're wrapping that up right now. We're furiously writing reports that will be published soon. Look for those in the coming weeks, that will talk about the many workshops that we've had on those subjects, many of which I'm sure folks in the room have been part of. And then step three after that, and I'll come back to step two in a second. Step three is all about what is the the minimum essential capabilities needed to enable those strategies. What technology, what capabilities do we need to develop? And that's why it's of interest to me, is because I need to be able to invest precious science and technology dollars in a way that maximizes the capabilities and the options that we will have to develop for the future. But let me go back to step 2 and some of our findings and conclusions. Throughout the process, we've identified that this United States Space Force really has a dual mandate when it comes to organizing, training, and equipping for the future. The first mandate is our number one priority and always has been, is to protect soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and to provide services and capabilities to allow them to execute their joint terrestrial fight in better ways to outmatch our adversaries. And that is a true challenge. That is something that we have not turned our eyes away from, and we will be continuing to do that. However, there's a second mandate that's evolving, and that's associated with this growth of activity in space. Things like the new industries for space tourism, space manufacturing, in-space assembly, all of those things represent growth in a new collection of U.S. interests that the national security space must protect. And that's our dual mandate, to develop the capabilities to provide the protection and the security and the deterrence of warfare in space around all of those activities. One of the findings of our Space Futures Workshop Step 2 is that we have passed the tipping point in that. It is no longer in the future that we will need to worry about a space economy that's a significant portion of our national economy. We're already there. We are beyond the tipping point in worrying about threats from space due to new technologies and capabilities from our strategic competitors. We are already there. And so many of their findings and recommendations that will come from that Space Futures Step 2 work will be published, and they will be recommendations not only to our leadership, but to industry, to Congress, and to other folks to be prepared for that dual mandate in space. One of the things that we have come to conclude from that Space Futures Workshop, but particularly the ones that we've had with industry, is that we need to enhance the communication and the education between our respective communities. Because space is exponential and full of chaos, disruption, and amazement, we need to be together to communicate what we see coming, what the vision for the future is, where we are headed in terms of our investments. So the U.S. government and the military needs to communicate where we need to go, where we see threats and opportunities for the future. We need to tell that to industry. But industry also needs to tell us what they see coming in terms of new capabilities, new technologies that may have dual use for us or may represent new threats that we need to be aware of and prepared for. But most importantly, we need to be on the lookout for technology surprise. In this new era of great power competition with peer competitors, the opportunity for surprise from outside of our shores is great. We need to be prepared for that. But tech surprise can also come from within. As we develop new technologies, think things like large language models like ChatGPT, that has opened up a new conversation about the national security around AI and related technologies. So that's a threat that came from within. We need to be aware of both of those. So that conversation and the kinds of conversations we're having here at the Space Industrial Base are very important, and we need to continue those. So as we go forward with this panel, and as my colleagues talk a little bit more about some of the findings and conclusions and recommendations that come from the Space Futures Workshop, I invite you to continue that conversation and be a part of the future moving forward so that we can maintain and persevere in our capabilities for the future. So again, I apologize I'm not able to be there today, but look forward to future interactions and conversations with all of you. Thank you very much.